3-gavel proclamation today. Welcome, everyone. We have some incredibly special guests today. We have 4 members of the Portland Thorns team here today, and we're going to acknowledge their excellence in the FIFA World Cup Championships. Could I ask Adriana French, Tobin Heath, Emily Sonnet, and Lindsay Oren to come on up and just have a seat. Yep, wherever you'd like. Here? Yep, have a seat. That's the hot seat. Thank you for being here. And before I get to the proclamation and before Commissioner Fish has some opening remarks, we thought it would be really interesting if maybe just as an icebreaker, you could maybe share a couple of sentences about what your favorite moment was in the World Cup.
For me, it was going around the stadiums and seeing Thorns in France and being able to point to those fans because that's what started everything for me moving forward, just the support that we have here.
Awesome. Thank you.
All from each of us.
You can move the mic a little closer. Yeah.
Okay. I think my favorite moment was probably going back to Paris. That's where my career started, and that's where I started playing with Tobin as well. So I think that was a really special moment for us, and playing there, playing in front of that city, and yeah, truly remarkable.
Thank you.
I would just say winning the World Cup was the best part.
I would also like to say winning the World Cup and just sharing it with these 3 and having familiar faces there. It was pretty special.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for being here today. Appreciate it. Commissioner Fish.
So there's a lot of young people here today, and not all of them are going to play for the Thorns or play for the national team. But they're going to play soccer in high school and maybe college, and they love the sport. Any advice for that next generation coming up in terms of how to approach soccer, and just any advice that you as professionals want to share with young people who are watching and who you've inspired?
I would just say, one, to make mistakes. Don't be afraid of failure. Walk straight into it. Be excited when you come before challenges, and be pioneers. Pave a different way. Be different.
Lindsay, why don't you jump in, because you took a somewhat unconventional route. You went, if I'm right, you went from high school to professional. Mm-hmm. So that's not the path everyone takes. Any advice for people who you've inspired?
Tobin told me to say go to college.
By the way, the University of Portland is right here, 2-time national champion. I don't know. I like to travel to the places, the East Coast, places like North Carolina. You've got plenty of options here.
No, I think what I would say is just keep loving the game as much as possible, and don't ever let anyone take that love away from you. And whether that's soccer or anything else that you're passionate about, don't let anyone, take that from you. Keep loving it. Keep working so hard for it. And, as much as you love it, I think that's where the hard work comes. So keep doing that as much as possible.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Fair?
I brought my flag home. It was really great being with the Riveters, and that was one of my favorite parts before the final. I only got to go to the final, but I got to go to the final. And with the Riveters, there must have been 100, 150 people from Portland there, doing the PTFC, and Mona Shim was there, and she was so nervous for you, former player. And it was just brilliant. I've watched it 3 times since I've got home again. I was sitting right on the corner line in the sun, so it was kind of hot. Tobin, your run into the penalty box when you had like 4 defenders on you and none of them knew what to do, and you were just kind of like teasing them like a cat with mice. It was just absolutely fantastic, and I just appreciate all of you for what you do here in Portland as well as on the national and international scenes. You are role models for so many people all over. And thank you for what you're doing for equal pay. I really appreciate that. I read The National Team by Caitlin Murray on my way over and on my way back, and it was really inspiring to see how much you've had to fight for what you've got and how you're continuing to have to do that. I also read a book called Soccernomics, which is really interesting, and it said that to get proficient at anything, you have to practice for 10,000 hours, which is about 4 years of being on the city council, which that's a lot of practice. So you didn't get where you are by goofing off. You worked really hard to get where you are, and I just want you to know that we really appreciate it. Thank you for choosing Portland as well as for your great performances.
By the way, just, I know we're going to be a little pressed for time, and I want to acknowledge, before the mayor reads the proclamation, I'd like to acknowledge the coach of the Thorns this year. Mark, where are you? Would you stand and be recognized? Congratulations for being first on the table. And I know you've got some tough games ahead, but we are looking forward to having a ticker tape parade to honor the Thorns at the end of this season. So congratulations, Coach. Thank you.
I feel like I have to say something. Well, I just want to welcome you to City Council. Thank you for everything you do. Little known fact about me, I was a soccer player throughout my school career, and I loved it. I was good at it, but in the mid-'80s, there wasn't really anywhere to go with it after high school. So I think I would have stayed out of a whole lot of trouble if there had been, and just want to congratulate you again. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so as we discussed upstairs, a proclamation is really the highest honor that we can give as the City Council. This is a statement of our collective values and the importance that we hold you in this community. And this is really on behalf of the entire community. As you can tell, we're all very grateful. Whereas the Portland Thorns FC is the Rose City's premier professional women's soccer team, and whereas the Portland Thorns FC won the National Women's Soccer League Championship in 2013 and 2017, and whereas the Portland Thorns FC has set attendance records across all of women's professional sport, and whereas the FIFA Women's World Cup is a global phenomenon involving 24 countries and showcasing the best women's soccer players in the entire world, and whereas during the 2019 World Cup, 9 members of the Portland Thorns FC played for 4 countries. And whereas Caitlin Ford, Haley Rosso, and Ellie Carpenter represented Australia, Andresina represented Brazil, and Christine Sinclair represented Canada. And whereas Tobin Heath, Lindsay Horan, Emily Sonnet, and Adriana French helped lead the United States women's national team to their 2nd consecutive World Cup title and their 4th World Cup championship. And whereas all 28 members of the United States women's national soccer team are plaintiffs in a lawsuit seeking equal pay. And whereas the players on the national team are great ambassadors for their sport on and off the pitch, and whereas the Portland City Council, representing Soccer City USA, thanks all 9 members of the Portland Thorns FC for their performance in the 2019 FIFA World Cup and congratulates the United States women's national soccer team on their championship. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, the mayor of the city of Portland, Oregon, the city of roses, do hereby proclaim July 2019 to be Portland Thorns FC Month in Portland and encourage all residents to observe this day.
We're going to ask you to come here, and we're going to join you for a photograph.
And if I could also, Commissioner Fish, if I could also acknowledge we have the State Attorney General here, Ellen Rosenblum is here, and our District Attorney, Rod Underhill, is here as well. And we ask them to come up as well. Thank you.
Alright. Okay, everyone look here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
This is not normal, by the way.
And one more here.
Can we give these players another round of applause? Hey, congratulations on your wedding. Let's get a picture.
Yes, please.
I went to the walk with refugees and immigrants, and I actually wore white. I immediately got coffee on there. I do that. Or bibs. Maybe bibs.
I've got an apron that I put on when I'm ready.
Carla, are we ready?
Yes.
All right, good morning, everybody. This is the slightly delayed morning session on July 31st, 2019, morning session of the Portland City Council. Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty, Udaly,
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Fish,
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. And thank you, everyone, for your patience. I hope you found that presentation with the Portland Thorns as exciting as I do. They're amazing, amazing women. We're going to now hear the rules of order and decorum from legal counsel. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. If it does not, you may be ruled out of order. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Please remain seated in council chambers unless entering or exiting. If you are filming the proceedings, please do not use bright lights or disrupt the meeting. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping keep your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Great. Thank you very much. First up is communications. Carla.
Okay. Item 698, request of Mr. Gregorio to address council regarding sidewalks and streets in very poor repair and how difficult it is for persons in wheelchairs to get around.
Is Mr. Gregorio here? Doesn't look like he is here yet, Carla. Next individual, please.
Item 699, request of Chuck Crockett to address council regarding contracts with sex offenders, civil rights violations, government and law enforcement authority.
Good morning.
Morning. Hello, Wheeler. Hello, City Council.
Morning.
Like I said, I signed up for communications because I emailed all of you about the situation with the sex offenders and Pastor Hennessy and the IPAC group. And my concern with that is that, Pastor Hennessy and the City Council made a outcall to the streets to form some kind of program or situation which would curb gang violence, and we responded to that. Well, we responded to that, and we didn't know that the City Council and the Portland Police and all of these groups were actually sitting in a group with a known sex offender and were condoning to it, and we don't condone to that. So we reached out to you in our concern with that and why the Portland Police would be claiming to have some kind of peace and action coalition with the sex offender as actually a threat to the community. And we know that's not the only sex offender involved in that group and involved in those kind of meetings. And our concerns are kind of validated as a community when you outreach to what you consider the gang community and they respond, and the response is met with that of sex offenders. That's not a good thing to see. Also, the civil rights violations that have been going on in the city of Portland with the Portland Police and the city government involving ORS 199.410, which mandates the city to review the community needs and provide services and programs to the needed community, which the city has not done. You yourself, Ted Wheeler, have admitted that the city has failed to provide housing for the displaced African Americans in Portland. Also, with those ORS violations, we have yet to see any improvement with the police. If you look at the quarterly review, you can see that African Americans are still being pulled over at 3 times the population. Basically one third or 1/4 of the total traffic stops of what Portland police are doing. And that was also a concern a couple years ago where a study was released that 59% of the 59% of the people that were stopped were African American. We've yet to see an actual direct impact of what the city has been able to do regarding the police. We also have Chief Outlaw, who just came from a situation involving a child that was being sex trafficked inside of the Oakland Police Department, who actually seems to be compliant with the sex offenders in the IPAC meeting and during those meetings. And also, we saw that you said that you guys were not going to be assisting ICE with immigrants, but we have yet to see you take the same stance towards African Americans and what the city government has been doing. So we are very concerned what the city government is going to do regarding our community, because it seems as though the city government is aiding everybody else, but the African American community is not in compliance with ORS 199.410. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next individual, please.
Item 700, request of Magali Morello to address council regarding Zenith and fossil fuel-related issues.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and council members. My name is Magali Morello, and I'm here today as the Energy Justice Organizer at Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility, a concerned mother, a local business owner, a community member, and as an Indigenous woman. Oregon PSR is an organization of health professionals and public health advocates working collaboratively with community partners to educate and advocate for societal and policy change that protects human health at the local, state, national, and international level. Thank you for the community forum that you hosted July 15th. I attended and testified, and although I understand that the permits allowed were in some regards a safer choice, I still stand firmly against any expansion and/or any permits to continue to operate or expand operations at the Zenith facility. I felt as though the community came together in numbers and strong messaging that we are completely unified against the danger that Zenith carries into our communities on a regular basis. It was encouraging to hear that the council and your colleagues in the Bureau of Emergency Management and Planning and Sustainability are looking for creative solutions to benefit the community and the environment. Like the idea of requiring that fossil fuel companies pay for an emergency fund. I know that we can find and fight for real solutions that consider more than just the needs of foreign investors. So thank you again for hearing the community concerns July 15th and for hearing me speak today. The storage and train traffic of fossil fuels like tar sands oil locally at Zenith pose serious public health and safety concerns. The forum and public materials from the city offer little answers or public confidence as to how prepared our local agencies are to respond to a likely spill or accident. I was glad to hear Mike Myers of PBEM say that communities have a right to know. Our community does have a right to know when these harmful chemical agents are traveling through and alongside our parks, schools, and homes with potential for explosive train derailment. We all have a right to know, but moreover, we have a right to feel safe and be safe in our communities. The Multnomah County Commissioner recently committed to $50,000 for a risk assessment of local fossil fuel infrastructure so that our local governments and communities are aware of the exact risks that we are facing. We ask City Council to match this commitment by setting aside $50,000 towards this project to collaborate with the county on risk assessment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here. Next individual, please, Carla.
Item 701, request of Marianne Schwab to address council regarding 3.96 code, current system of recognizing neighborhood and business associations is the city's human infrastructure and must not be discarded, 92%.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Marianne Schwab, a community advocate. Let me start today by saying thank you to the members of the 396 Code Advisory Committee representing a wonderful cross-section of ages, occupations, religious affiliations for volunteering their time. And I sincerely hope they will consider serving a little bit longer. What I find troubling is the committee went the opposite direction as directed by council under RES 37373 by not formally recognizing other groups and dismantling the neighborhood association system, especially when learning the Code Committee was not given no reference to the Auditor's Report, the adopted public involvement principles, or Chapter 2 of the Comp Plan, which deals with public involvement. The auditor said in her report, the neighborhood associations need to be strengthened, not disbanded. I respectfully suggesting that more work is needed on the code language before it is viewed as completed by the city's auditor, mayor, and commissioners prior to the first reading October 3rd, 2019. The ONI system is recognizing neighborhood and business associations is part of the city's human infrastructure, must not be discarded. The city needs to strengthen and build upon the strengths of existing neighborhood association while broadening it to involve full diversity of our communities. The OCCL draft proposal in front of City Council to eliminate neighborhood associations effectively guts the City Charter 396 code. It will eliminate opportunities for funding staff to help constituents solve problems within their community. The city charter is designed to make amendments when needed. However, you don't tear up the city charter Chapter 396 only, which is the foundation of how people have interacted with the City of Portland. To help guide each of you, I'm asking the City Code, the City Council, and the public at large to strongly consider Robert McCullough's response to the Office in Community and Civic Life Core Change, frequently asked questions, which helps illustrate the depth of the issues within the OCC Code Committee's proposed amendments. In closing, Council, please consider telling Civic Life to start over entirely with a new committee, involve neighborhood associations as key stakeholders at the start of a community-based organizations and the historically underrepresented groups, albeit with all this discussion about updating city code and standards to update and improve city civic engagement framework should happen in the context of and after City Council addresses city charter, which is up for review in 2020 or 2021. Thank you for using this process to hear from people and constituents like me who care. Little proscript. Don't bend, don't water it down, don't try to make it logical, don't edit your own soul-searching to fashion. Rather, follow your most intense obsessions mercilessly. Franz Kafka. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Commissioner Daly?
Marianne, thank you for being here today. You know I appreciate you, and we're not going to have a dialogue on this, but I'm going to comment on what you just said, because you are spreading misinformation along with media outlets and other community members that I can't let stand. We are absolutely not dismantling the neighborhood associations. Nothing is changing for them. They will continue to exist. They will continue to work with coalitions, which we will continue to fund. They will continue to be notified, to receive notices from bureaus, and they are actually included in the code change. As far as the auditor's report, we are making great strides towards addressing the issues raised by that report, and this code change is actually part of that. It does not eliminate any opportunities for neighborhood associations to participate. We are simply adding chairs to what has been a very exclusive table. And finally, starting over with a new committee is very disrespectful to the people that volunteered their time to this process. And these are esteemed community members. And I'm just very disappointed to hear what you had to say. Let's have a debate about what's really happening, not spread misinformation about it. Thank you. It's not a dialogue. We're done.
We can agree to disagree.
I'm absolutely not going to do that.
Thank you, Marianne. Next individual, please, Carla.
Item 702, request of Tiffany Hammer to address council regarding Southwest 14th Avenue and Montgomery Goose Hollow area boulders and body removed from sidewalk.
Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for your time. I have 3 little kids at home and I got an ear infection, so I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic off to my neighbor to represent Goose Hall, if that's okay.
Certainly.
I feel like I can't hear very well.
Sorry you're not feeling well.
It happens.
Thank you.
Bad timing.
Thank you for being
Does
here.
this microphone work?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And if you could also state your name for the record, please.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and City Commissioners. Thank you for your time today. My name is Marlene Aviles Cable, and I'm a resident of the diverse Goose Hollow PSU area. I was also present on May 8th, along with other neighbors, to support Tiffany Hammer, another crime victim who testified on behalf of our neighborhood. The City of Portland is promoting a program through the Office of Civic Life called Neighbors Together. Goose Hollow neighbors came together because we felt we were left to fend for ourselves to address our public safety issues. Us neighbors back in February reclaimed the ODOT land at Southwest 14th and Montgomery. We replanted 90 rose bushes in order to replace the ones charred by propane tank explosions and devastated by excrement and needles. Sadly, one of our volunteers was the victim of an unprovoked attack by a man with a brick who was out on probation. While he was ultimately convicted of a felony, we recognized maintaining the roses would put us in harm's way daily. Other neighbors continue to be harassed and threatened by the criminal element. People have yelled at me to go back to where I came from and have warned me on my own driveway to stop speaking Spanish to my teen son. I am also a crime victim. A brick was thrown through our front window while I was home alone during an attempted break-in. And unfortunately, that was just the first violation of my home. Because of the lack of funded jail space, the criminals who were picked up here on our ODOT land for warrants kept returning. As a last resort, ODOT came in and recognized the safety issues for everyone and dropped boulders. Post boulders, we are not able to walk through our community with our families and pets. After a year and a half of constant crimes, it finally feels more safe and livable. So we are grateful to ODOT for helping us. The last time we came before you, our neighborhood was encouraged by you to remain focused on criminal behavior because, and I quote, "That's what we can do something about." The boulders were a solution of last resort after neighbors and crime victims came together to engage in safe, level-headed problem solving as neighbors together. Considering we are trying to proceed in the city's direction, working as neighbors together, why are the results now being criticized?
Mayor, can I just make a comment?
Commissioner Fish.
First of all, thank you both for being here, and if you're not feeling well, especially thank you for, I have spent the last 10 years on the council, or maybe a little bit more, being one of the champions for humane and rational approaches and solutions to our homeless crisis. But we have always been clear as a council to separate out status from behavior. That is, we do not allow someone to be demonized in our community because they are poor, or because they have been evicted, or because they're mentally ill, or because they have a substance abuse problem, or whatever. And it is one of our great challenges to get people off the streets into housing. We're making progress, but as you know, the problem is swamping this city and cities up and down the West Coast. What you have described now on 2 occasions is not about someone's status. You've not come in and said that someone is camping and you find that somehow offensive. You have said there are people in the community breaking the law and doing things which make you feel unsafe. That's an entirely different matter. And frankly, I think what you have done in framing this issue has given us an opportunity, as we start talking about police reform and about how we invest in the police budget and about who does what, to start thinking about how we deploy people to address these kinds of issues. So your testimony is not going to maybe move the needle today. There's nothing we can do today other than to say we regret that you've had these experiences, and thank you for sharing your story. But I do think that it invites us to think more creatively about how we engage bad actors on the street. And again, in a respectful way, and how we keep people in neighborhoods safe. So thank you for joining us, and I assure you through the fall, we will be talking about this in the context of how we deploy police officers, both armed and not armed, and also how we craft a budget. So thank you very much.
I also want to thank you for being here, and I know this is the second or the third time that you've had the opportunity to be here, and I think it's important for people to hear all sides of this conversation. And what I hear from Portlanders is they want a humane solution to the homeless crisis. That's here. Nobody wants criminal activity, and certainly violence is unacceptable. And so I appreciate the fact that you continue to have the dialogue with us and with my office and Robert King and others. So thank you for that. Thanks for being here. Sorry you're sick. I hope you get well soon. Ear infections are no fun. Ask me how I know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Fish.
Before we move to the first time certain, can we just welcome and acknowledge some special guests that are here?
We still have...
I'm sorry.
No, you're right. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner. That was the last.
Do we have the BES interns here? We do. So would you all please stand for a moment? Mayor and colleagues, I want to acknowledge some special guests this morning. Every summer, a group of Bureau and Environmental Services interns attend a city council session. I think they chose a pretty good one today.
Yeah,
the BES internship program brings 8 Portland students to the Bureau for 8 weeks. Each student rotates through different sections of the Bureau to experience and contribute to a variety of our work. And every Wednesday, the group gets together to learn about the city, like today's visit to City Hall. This summer, we have a really outstanding group of young people. 3 high school juniors, 2 seniors, and 3 2019 graduates from Roosevelt, Park Rose, Grant, Cleveland, Madison, and David Douglas High Schools. I guess those are for all the kids, that's where they're from. And I just want to acknowledge and introduce the students. They are Eric Barrientos, Brenda Chavez, Malik Kuma, Aiden Lenz, Olivia Martinez Garcia, Bonnie O'Neill, Aaliyah Starman, and Miles Takaguchi. And let me close by saying, not only are we grateful that you're joining us, but we hope that from this experience, you'll consider potentially a career in public service at the city. So Mayor, can we suspend the rules and welcome our special guest?
You bet. Thanks a lot.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Carl, have any items been pulled off the consent agenda?
Yes, we've had a request for item 710.
710 has been pulled. Call the roll on the remainder, please.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. Consent agenda is adopted. First time certain. Item 703.
703, report on recent work from the city auditor, Portland Parks Golf, Fixing Our Streets program, Portland Building Follow-up, and Housing Bond.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I am City Auditor Mary Hall Caballero, and we are here to present results from our most recent 4 audits. And I'm going to jump right in since we have a lot to present today with introductions of my staff who are going to do the honors of the presentations. First, Audit Services Director Kari Guy is going to present the Portland Parks Golf Audit on behalf of Bob McKay, who led the audit team. Jennifer Scott will discuss Fixing Our Streets. And then after those 2 presentations, Tenzin Gonta will come up and she will talk about the Portland Building Audit, and Martha Prince will report on the Housing Bond Audit. Before we begin, I want to mention that we also published an audit about the cannabis tax revenue, which I presented at the budget work session, and we're going to have a related audit on cannabis regulation in the fall. And you can also look forward to another audit of the Portland building, which focuses on cost compliance and change orders. We contracted with construction experts for that work. And one final note, Mayor, I'd like to remind you that no council action is necessary at the end of our presentation. We are here strictly for information sharing purposes. So let's begin with the golf audit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Again, I'm Kari Guy. We produced this audit in May of this year. Portland Parks and Rec golf program is intended to be self-supporting. However, in 2017, it required an $800,000 infusion from the general fund to remain solvent. Golf has been in decline both locally and nationally for a number of years. In the 5 years of our audit, the golf rounds at city courses were down about 6%, and over 25 years, they're down 46%. We audited the program to see if it is now positioned to be financially stable and if the program is managed effectively. For background, the city owns 5 courses, 4 on the east side of the Willamette and 1 in Beaverton. In general, city staff maintain the courses in most clubhouses, while daily operations are managed by private operators under contract with the city. But the city's involvement in each of the 5 courses varies. Currently, there are 5 unique contracts, 4 different operators, and 3 different agreement types, each with different terms. This complexity creates challenges for oversight. There are many variables that influence the success of the golf program, some within Parks' control, like the fees, and some completely out of their control, like the weather. After the general fund transfer in 2017, Portland Parks Golf improved practices to address some of these variables. They reduced maintenance costs by cutting positions and sharing maintenance staff and equipment across courses. They also hired a new director, and they put a lot of effort into increasing outreach to more diverse communities to recruit new players to the game. But Parks hasn't yet addressed some of the other variables that affect success, such as the deferred maintenance at the courses. The result is that financial risks remain. Some courses are doing better than others. 3 of the courses had positive cash flow in all of the 5 years we reviewed. But the negative cash flow at some courses, combined with the golf program's administrative overhead costs of about $1 million per year, meant the program had an overall negative income in 3 of the 5 years that we looked at. In addition, the newest course, Colwood, which was purchased in 2014 with a loan from the Parks Capital Improvement Fund, the debt repayment will continue to impact the golf fund for 4 more years. So financially, this leaves the program with a very tight margin. In a good weather year, if the recruiting new players is successful, they will have a positive balance. And in fact, Parks reports that in fiscal year 19, after our audit was completed, they did end in the black. But another rainy year and slow recruitment of new golfers may leave the fund again in trouble without further action by council. We also looked at Portland Park's administration of the operator contracts. As I mentioned earlier, there are 5 different agreements, including 1 lease, 2 concession agreements, and 2 management agreements. We found lax contract management, relying more on trust and relationships with the operators. For example, some contract provisions were not followed, such as not asking for required marketing plans or not conducting the performance reviews. And although the contracts require parks to perform routine maintenance, deferred maintenance has been mounting for most facilities. Finally, the 5 courses were not identified as part of the larger parks program. So a visitor to these courses doesn't necessarily know they're part of Portland Parks. The only indication they were part of a city system that our auditors saw when they were on site were no smoking signs. Parks has now aligned the East Side contracts to end at the same time and is planning on soliciting bids to operate under a more streamlined system. This move provides an opportunity to address some of these issues that we identified in the audit. We had 2 main recommendations. First, that Parks develop alternative financial forecast scenarios and present them to City Council for direction on how to proceed, and including in those forecasts a way to address deferred maintenance and some of the other issues in the audit. And second, that as they renegotiate contracts, they reflect current program conditions and increase the monitoring of contract provisions to ensure that contract provisions are followed.
Mayor?
Commissioner Fish.
Because you said that you're going to be rotating out auditors, Madam Auditor, is it okay if I just
Absolutely.
make a comment now?
Please.
First of all, I have been the commissioner in charge since last September, and obviously the Parks Bureau welcomes this audit. We have, in the letter that's attached to the audit, we have embraced the recommendations, and we thank you for them. You were exactly right in what you said earlier about one of the key variables for us, which is the weather. And who can predict that? But as you said, it turns out that in 2018, 2019, we had decent weather. We're having great weather now, and frankly, I think it's going to have a significant impact on revenues. But to the points that you made, I just want to say to the new leadership team that was put in place before I took over at Golf, in the last fiscal year, they made over $500,000 in net revenue, so that's at least a positive sign, again, reflecting good weather and good management. We have in our reserves now $1 million, and you've pointed out that those reserves are vulnerable to some of the costs that we have, but we're pleased that we've got the reserves up to $1 million, and we intend to set a more ambitious goal. We'll be looking at a sustainable path forward, and the next milestone for us will be coming to council in November to talk to council about options for putting parks on a more solid financial footing going forward. Now, while we're looking at it enterprise-wide, it's going to be fair to ask, how does that impact some of our enterprise businesses like golf? So to the auditor and her team, thank you for a thoughtful audit. It raised a number of issues that we're tackling as we speak, and I spend every night saying an extra prayer that we have decent weather. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Hi, my name is Jenny Scott, and I led the audit of the Fixing Our Streets program. We released our audit report called Fixing Our Streets, Some Accountability Commitments Not Fulfilled in May. Portland voters approved a temporary gas tax in May 2016 to fund a Bureau of Transportation program called Fixing Our Streets. Council passed a separate tax on heavy vehicles to help ensure that all vehicle owners fund the program. 2 years into the program, we assessed how the city is delivering on these Fixing Our Streets accountability and program commitments. I'm going to walk through our findings related to each one of these commitments. We assessed whether 45 gas tax funded projects and 14 heavy vehicles tax funded projects were completed on schedule and within budget. Of the 59 projects we examined, 38 were scheduled to start before 2019. We found that only 12 projects had started before 2019, and 8 were completed before 2019. Bureau staff said the schedules, which were developed after the gas tax was approved, were not realistic and that it took longer than anticipated to break ground because the scopes of individual projects were not well defined. Of the 8 projects that were completed before 2019, 4 were on budget. 2 were over budget and 2 were under budget. Overall, these projects were $900,000 or 15% over the budgets communicated to voters. Bureau staff said that the budgets were only estimates subject to change. Council adopted the heavy vehicle use tax to help ensure that heavy vehicle owners pay their fair share of the program since they do not pay the gas tax. We found that heavy vehicle owners did not pay into the program commensurate with what experts calculated was their share of city street maintenance, operations, and improvement costs. Council required that the tax paid by owners of heavy vehicles generate $10 million over 4 years, and code required that the tax rate be adjusted if it generated more or less than $2.5 million in its first or second year of collection. During the first year of the tax, heavy vehicle owners paid $1.8 million, well below the $2.5 million goal. However, council eliminated the requirement that the rate be adjusted to meet the revenue goal, citing concerns from the Freight and Fixing Our Streets Oversight Committees. The Fixing Our Streets Program's Oversight Committee is comprised of volunteers who meet quarterly. The Bureau provided the committee with volumes of information. However, we found that the committee could not effectively fulfill its monitoring role because the project lists and financial reports the Bureau provided them were incomplete, inconsistent, and outdated. We also found that the committee did not fulfill their reporting requirements. City Council made 3 commitments regarding audits, each suggesting a different type of review and focus. We found that the Bureau was not inviting the oversight, transparency, and accountability that Council's commitments implied because it was not obtaining annual program audits or sharing results. The city committed to maintain a precise expenditure split between street repair and safety projects. It was difficult to determine if the Bureau had maintained the spending split it promised. A project list available to voters didn't indicate that street repair projects may include safety elements, and a plan to prioritize Americans with Disabilities Act curb ramps was classified as a safety project. The Bureau included new curb ramps in the budgets of all the Fixing Our Streets paving projects, with the exception of base repair. On the other hand, when safety projects needed paving done, that work was not included in the Fixing Our Streets safety project budget. For one project in our sample, the paving work was funded from the Fixing Our Streets street repair budget. And for the other safety project, the paving work was paid for with funds from outside of the Fixing Our Streets program. Since the gas tax measure included a commitment that future funds be allocated 56% to street repair and 44% to safety, the Bureau needs to clarify what constitutes a street repair project versus a safety project and how those funds are accounted for. To ensure that monitoring and oversight of the Fixing Our Streets program is effective, the Bureau of Transportation should provide the Fixing Our Streets Oversight Committee with information needed to understand and carry out its responsibility. To meet public expectations, the Bureau of Transportation should track and publicly report on Fixing Our Streets projects as they relate to public commitments, explore opportunities to ensure that heavy vehicle owners pay their share of the program, specify the type of audit desired and ensure that audit commitments are fulfilled and reported, and make ballot commitments that are clear, realistic, measurable, achievable, and time-bound. To ensure that funds are tracked and spent according to commitments made to voters, the Bureau of Transportation, with the input of the Oversight Committee and Council, should clarify language regarding the split of funding for street repair and safety projects, and informed by the clarification, the Bureau should track and account for spending to ensure that the split of funding for street repair and safety projects is maintained. Thank you.
Mayor.
Commissioner Daly.
Well, hello.
Hello.
Thank you. I always look forward to these audits, and if the public's interested, you can read our responses at the end of this report. I'm pleased to say that we agree with all the issues that you highlighted, and that we either were already making progress on them by the time the audit was completed, or we have now begun. So I always appreciate the feedback from the auditor's office, and but I do want to add that I'm really proud of the work that the Bureau has done, and note that we are on track to finish 20 projects this year and break ground on an additional 21. So I think our one-year review is going to be a glowing report. At least that's my goal. Thank you.
Commissioner,
Yes,
can I just use this opportunity to thank you for something?
certainly.
I don't know whether, has the auditor, have you done an audit of Vision Zero?
No, that was one of the options we considered, but we
thank you.
focused on fixing our.
Not a specific, but, well, I just wanted to say that we reached out to Commissioner Daly's office recently and said, we'd like to go out into the field and see high crash corridors, and for ourselves, and I'm sure you as auditors like to get out in the field and actually see the work. And so we had an all-star team that spent a morning with us showing us high crash corridors and intersections, and our head was spinning with all the information we got. But there's nothing like seeing it firsthand, and also to see the remarkable investment that the city's making throughout the city. So we learned a lot, and we're really appreciative of the extra mile that PBOT went to give us a front row seat on what's happening. And I tell you, my takeaway is that I'm even more committed to finding the dollars to help you meet the mission goals of Vision Zero.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're ready to move on to the Portland building audit.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Tenzin Gonta, and I served as the lead auditor for the Portland building audit. Our June report is titled Greater Transparency Needed About Project Costs, Trade-offs, and Missed Equity Requirement. The Portland building is an active construction site, and the renovation is forecasted to be completed ahead of schedule. Our first audit of the renovation covered the planning phase and ended in July 2016 after the city's selection of its construction contractor. At that point, crucial decisions remained during the design phase, most notably about the project's defined scope. This second audit follows up on the 3 areas we identified that the city should closely manage for the Portland building renovation to be a success. Our follow-up fieldwork period ended in December 2018. Unfortunately, the city did not fully implement those early recommendations. While the opportunity to revisit decisions has passed, we make new recommendations for the remainder of the project. We'll now go into each of the 3 follow-up areas that align with these 2016 recommendations: project costs, trade-offs, and equity grants. The first follow-up area focused on project costs. We found that the budget transparency is still needed for the collective costs associated with the Portland building. The public narrative about the Portland building is focused on activities tied to the $195 million budget. This is the budget shared with council and the oversight committee and posted on the city website. However, this public narrative does not include all the components critical to delivering a functional building. As of December 2018, projected costs for the Portland building grew to $214 million once these side projects were included. Here's an example of a side project. When the project scope began to be defined in December 2016, the $195 million budget excluded the build-out of 2.5 office floors in the building. Later in March 2017, the project team requested to finish these 2.5 floors, and council approved the additional $7 million. These collective Portland building costs are important because they will be allocated to tenant bureaus and ultimately will have a long-term effect on the city's capacity for direct services to residents. The city's downtown tenant rates will go up by 102% between fiscal year 2019 and fiscal year 2021. And this is primarily driven by the Portland building's collective costs. About 1/4 of these increased costs will be borne by the general fund, with development services, transportation, and utility funds responsible for most of the remainder. Over the years, the project team has been transparent with council about each individual budget request, but there's been no presentation of the collective costs that result from these piecemeal decisions. Given the significance of the side project activity, we recommend the collective Portland building costs be described when presenting budget to actual reports to council and the oversight committee. The second follow-up area is about trade-off decisions. The project team committed to minimum requirements and also introduced the opportunity to pursue additional goals and aspirations, as shown in this image from their July 2016 presentation to council. We found the city is on track to meet minimum requirements. For example, the requirement to eliminate water intrusion. However, the city did not report on trade-offs that affected other opportunities to reach beyond the project's minimum requirements. The city will fall short of the goals and aspirations stated in the project charter in the areas of accessibility, sustainability, and historic preservation. For accessibility, the city anticipates some previously inventoried barriers will remain in parts of the building not included in the renovation, such as stairway and elevator areas. For sustainability, the building is on track to achieve LEED Gold certification, but the city pursued exemptions for 3 other policy requirements, and we found no evidence that the project met another 2 policy requirements. For historic preservation, the city chose an exterior design to address the building's water leaks, which will result in the building's delisting from the National Register of Historic Places. There are still compliance actions for the city to take. We make specific recommendations related to the Americans with Disabilities Act and historic preservations at the state and local level. Our third and last follow-up area examined the Portland Building Equity Grants. In 2016, council set aside $1 million of the renovation budget for community benefits to address historical inequities in construction and improve diversity in the workforce and among subcontractors. Council also required that community benefits, quote, be dispersed in phases through the life of the Portland Building project, and the chief administrative officer will report back regularly to the council on activities and results, end quote. We found the city missed these equity requirements for the Portland building. As of December 2018, there has been no report to council about the status of these activities or results. We found no community grants were made to support disadvantaged workers and businesses, and the city had no plan to ensure the money would be dispersed by the time the building is complete. Given the unspent funds, it is unclear how about $360,000 from water and sewer ratepayers will remain accountable to these restricted sources. Lastly, with less than 1 year of construction remaining, the city missed a strategic opportunity to use community benefits funding to help meet its stated equity goals for the Portland building. Given the challenges that remain with the Portland building's community benefits, we recommend that the Chief Administrative Officer report to council as required by the original resolution and inform 2018 applicants of the city's grant-making status, and remove ratepayer funds from the community benefits budget if future grants are not reasonably related to the provision of water and sewer services. That concludes our presentation of this audit report. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. I have a number of comments, and I feel like I've already made most of my comments, both in terms of defending the work of the city and validating the information that the Community Oversight Committee has already provided, which disagrees with many of the findings in this audit. So I don't want to go in that direction today. What I want to do is talk about what I think is a fundamental disconnect in the way we are evaluating large-scale capital construction projects. Because as you read the audit and then you read the responses to the audit, it's very clear we have a disconnect. There is not agreement, for example, on what the original scope of the project is. And as somebody who has come in, and the chief administrative officer who came in after this project was already scoped and underway, I find that somewhat remarkable that there wasn't a meeting of the minds, including the audit team, the auditor, to clearly define what the scope of the project is. And so the response has been that the audit says that the project team did not begin, quote, excluding some elements from the did begin excluding some elements from the project scope to stay within its $195 million proposed budget. But the response, both from the CAO as well as the Community Oversight Committee, which is composed of experienced developers, says that furnishings, technology, equipment, and childcare build-out were never part of the project scope. What happened, in fact, was additional packages were brought to the City Council for approval, and they could either vote it up, which would increase the cost of the project, or they could vote it down. One project that was brought to the City Council that was approved, for example, is the space optimization project. And this was an attempt, there is a cost to the space optimization project. It brings more people into the building. It lowers out year costs by about $25 million over the next 20 years by bringing more people in so we don't have more leases outside of the project. My concern, if the standard by which we are judging projects in the future is you said it was going to be X. In this case, X is $195 million. But if somebody brings new ideas to the council, for example, technology could be implemented better, space could be utilized more efficiently, and these things could save the city ongoing operating costs, getting to the first sentence that you mentioned about how the capital construction piece potentially limits other resources for other city services. If the council votes for things like space optimization or technology that in fact give us an even greater opportunity to save out-year funding, I'm afraid that the council will choose to not vote for those things, nor will those things come to the council, because people know that that will, by definition, make the project over budget. And the Project Oversight Committee took a good hard look at that question, and they said, no, these things should not be part of the baseline by which you are judging this project to be either on budget or off budget. We can have an honest disagreement about that, but I think going forward, we need to have that conversation about whether or not these things are going to be considered included in that original estimate or not, because that's the difference between us being either on budget or not being on budget. And so I just think there's sort of a leadership question there, maybe more than an accountability question. By the way, the space optimization issue, it's my understanding that that will be covered by the contingency that remains in the budget. You had made a recommendation that we post additional budget information on the project website. It's my understanding, Tom, has that been done? And that is continuing to be done. I thought that was a great recommendation, so that information is available. Regarding the equity issue, the way it is being presented is as though we have completely blown it off, and that could not be farther from the truth. The COEP dollars that your team identified, which is, I believe, more than $800,000, that's going to be released once the COEP is established in Prosper Portland through the direction of the City Council. In short, the opportunity, though delayed, will in fact be realized as part of this project. And last but not least, I'm not sure we have clarity on what the role of the Citizen Oversight Committee actually is. I personally have viewed that, and I believe, I won't speak for the Chief Administrative Officer, but I believe he has viewed that as highly experienced, knowledgeable citizen eyes looking at everything. And their response, I'll just read a piece of this, is that that committee says, this letter is to underscore that in our view, the city staff have been very transparent with our committee on every aspect of the project, including granular matters concerning the budget, the scope, changes, and timing. There have been a number of difficult decisions relating to the building, and they've been shared with us, and to our knowledge, none of these have been contrary to the recommendations that we have made. And then they go on to talk about some of the other issues. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for Madam Auditor and for the auditing team. I think you can look back on my history as an elected official. You will see I have a tremendous amount of respect for the audit function, and I value the audit function as a way to sharpen, to improve, and to call attention to really important issues. But on this one, I and the Chief Administrative Officer and the Citizen Oversight Committee, we have fundamental disagreements, and it's my estimation that those disagreements should have been resolved at the beginning of the project. We should have agreed, what are we going to be judged on? What are we in agreement on in terms of the budget and the costs? And what is going to be expected in terms of the council's participation and inclusion in these matters. And I look forward to working with you, because I know you have a number of ideas and suggestions, as do I. So that's just sort of my commentary for today.
Mayor, if I could speak broadly,
Madam Auditor, you bet.
not to the specifics of what you're saying, but our process starts with the documentation. So I was here when there were lots of discussions about that $195 million. I am also aware that people were uncomfortable with such a hard and fast $195 million, not one penny more. I do think that's a dangerous way to approach a capital project. I think now we're at the point where we've borrowed $214 million, and that doesn't include the debt service on that borrowing. And so we have tracked back to the beginning of this project to where we are now. And so I appreciate what you're saying, that maybe it wasn't as organized at the beginning as it should be, and that's some of the things that we're pointing out, is that there were representations made to the public, and I am not sure that the public understood that they were going to get a $214 million bill for this building. And so what we've done is, from the beginning of that to where we are now, looked at some of the things that we led us to where we got to $214 million. And in the original report, there were recommendations made saying, hey, you should pay attention to these areas, and there was some lack of clarity around the Oversight Committee and what their role was and who they were reporting to. And so we've just come back around with this second audit with some new recommendations from that point of view.
Great, and I look forward to that. Commissioner Fish?
It's a good conversation, and so it seems to me there were 4 people that were actually here at that time. This is part of the challenge of our form of government with people coming and going. You were the auditor. Commissioner Saltzman was sitting next to me, and he was the author of that line, not a penny more than 195. How many times we heard that? Yes. It was his mantra. And then Commissioner Fritz was here. The thing I've struggled with a little bit in terms of the cost issue is that I remember cost coming up in the context of us looking at the alternatives to the Portland building. So we put together a blue ribbon group. They came back and looked at demolishing the building, renovating the building, selling the building, looking for another building, leasing. I think they looked at a range of choices. I think we were all somewhat surprised when they came back and said, renovating this building is the low-cost option. That was not intuitively what I thought was where it was going to land. But an independent panel came back and said, your most effective use of taxpayer dollars is to renovate what you have for a variety of reasons. I have to go back and look at the conversation, but I'll be honest with you. My recollection is when Commissioner Saltzman used to say not a penny over 195, it was his way of saying, don't come back and say we're going to have a new siding, or don't put in a new dining room, or don't come in with some new bell and whistle. My own view, and again, my memory isn't as good as it used to be, so I'll have to go back and look at the record, is that things like desks and equipment and how we organize the space and technology was going to be a cost no matter where we went. And I did not at the time assume that was within the 195. I'll just tell you as someone who voted on it, and partly because I didn't think those were costs we had quantified. And in fact, we were still doing all this work with staff about how we were going to configure the space and how many people could we fit and other things. So I may be wrong. I mean, I'm going to go back because Dan was the most vocal in terms of the hard cap. But just my recollection is that the costs that you've identified in your report that are above the line, above 195, my recollection is those were not costs that we considered as part of the 195. Maybe I'm wrong, but at least when I cast the vote, I thought we were talking about hard construction costs, not the soft costs of filling the building. So,
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back to our original audit report because if you remember, and this is again years ago, there was an original estimate of $95 million back in 2014, and then that went up to $175 million to reflect the additional scopes of work. So it wasn't just going to be the envelope fix that they were to address the water intrusion. That's when the seismic upgrades, as well as some of the interior improvements, were reflected in that cost. And then when it came to our audit report, we were looking at the 195, and we couldn't see the delta, the $20 million difference between what was in the supported estimates of $175 million and then the $195 million. So at that point, the project team at that time, under the previous chief administrative officer, gave us more detailed line item information. And if you look in our audit report, there was actually a line item for furniture, fixtures, and equipment of $10 million. So to me,
in the 195?
In the 195 that they provided to us. So part of the challenge is then,
This CAO?
no, the previous CAO.
Previous CAO.
Yeah, this is all before December of 2016. So when we're tracing that information, moving it forward to try and see what that $195 million activity, how that's reflected in current approaches to the renovation, that's where we see the disconnect. That's just one example.
So I think so to get back to what the auditor said and what the mayor alluded to, lesson for me in this is to be even more rigorous in terms of identifying the hard costs and the soft costs.
Mm-hmm.
When we say the hard construction costs, we're talking about, maybe having, my understanding is that if you start bumping up against hard construction costs, you can always do some value engineering to come below. If, let's say, your costs of materials go above what you expect and other things. I think we have to be clear as a council in distinguishing that from soft costs, because the soft costs could change all the time based on, let's say, changes in technology or changes in how we want to configure the workplace. And I believe they are separate and distinct. So I think you've raised the question that we can address more rigorously in the future about being clear. So I appreciate your point.
And I think just to add, I think this build, and we haven't done a lot of construction, capital construction audits, but I think this project is a little bit different, that the scope was meant to be flexible because of the fixed time and budget elements. So if you think about the project management triangle, there's three different elements, and one is going to be the one that moves if there's any kind of pressure on the other two. So I don't know if the project definition issue is going to be something you would see in other capital activity here at the city.
Yeah, that's fair enough, and I appreciate that. And this is a really good conversation, and I guess if I had to boil it down into one sentence, it would be, how do we set the original objective, be transparent about the objective, but also have the opportunity, if we see opportunities through technology configuration or whatever, to be able to reduce ongoing operating costs on a permanent basis, or even for a number of many years. I want this council to feel the ability to take that option. And I don't want the council to feel that they would be penalized for having found a way to reduce costs over the long term. But for me, the big lesson in all of this is I don't think we agreed on the standard up front. And so this is, for me, a really good learning opportunity going forward. And I stipulate all the things you say about transparency and putting budget data online. I know a ton of people don't look at it, but it should be available there. I concur with you 100% on that, because there are some people who will take a good hard look at it. So I appreciate your work on this. Thank you.
And we're going to wrap up with the housing bond audit, which has some very good news in it.
Good morning. My name is Martha
Morning.
Prince. I'm a performance auditor for the city, and I completed our June 2019 audit of the city's housing bond. We took on this audit to check on the housing bond relatively early in the life of the bond, a little less than halfway through the life of the bond. And just for some background, Portland voters approved the $258 million housing bond in November 2016. Our audit looked at whether the Housing Bureau established and was applying clear criteria for project selection to ensure bond goals would be met. We also looked at whether the Bureau had systems in place to make sure bond-funded housing served intended populations. Our audit looked at the city's first 5 housing bond projects, totaling 593 units that are either already existing or planned. The first project, a building called the Ellington, which had 262 units and is on Northeast 66th, already had tenants when the city purchased it soon after the housing bond was approved. In September 2017, the Housing Bureau purchased a lot with a building on it at Southeast 30th and Powell with the intent to demolish the building and develop the lot into a 160-unit building. The city purchased a new apartment building at Southeast 105th and Burnside in June 2018, which has now been leased out. That building has 51 units. In July 2018, the Bureau purchased a lot with a house on it, slated for demolition and development of a 50-unit building at Northeast 58th and Prescott. Finally, the city bought an existing 70-unit apartment building, the West Wind in Old Town, which serves a very low-income population. It's in poor condition, and the Bureau plans to replace it with the same size building serving the same population. Leading up to the election, the city told voters that the housing bond, which was to be repaid from property taxes, would house families, seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities. The bond was meant to fund 1,300 housing units over 5 to 8 years, serving households making no more than 60% of the median income for the region, and in some cases, no more than 30% of median income. Half of the 1,300 units would be family-sized, meaning 2 bedrooms or more. And if non-bond funds are available, 300 of the very low-income units will be designated as supportive housing units, which means they include help for tenants with complex needs. When the bond passed in 2016, state law said that only a public entity could own bond-funded properties. Typically, the Housing Bureau acts as a lender rather than an owner, and that meant they'd be taking on a new role. The Bureau turned to Multnomah County's Housing Authority, Home Forward, for help with its new ownership role. Overall, our audit found the housing bond to be off to a solid start. First, we found the Housing Bureau developed project selection criteria that were mostly in line with promises to voters. The criteria were developed over several months by a group convened by the Bureau after the purchase of the Ellington, which prompted some housing stakeholders to argue for an overall strategy before additional bond purchases were made. City Council adopted the criteria in October 2017, around the same time that the second housing bond purchase was adopted. That criteria, known as the policy framework, when compared to the ballot language, introduced new areas of focus and de-emphasized or eliminated some topics. Veterans, although included in the ballot language, were not included in the policy framework. And seniors and people with disabilities, although included in the framework, weren't emphasized as much as might have been expected based on their prominence in the ballot language. Our second audit finding was that the Housing Bureau appeared to apply project selection criteria consistently when choosing which bond projects to pursue.
I'm sorry, consistently? Do me
Consistently.
a favor, move the mic just a little closer.
Oh, sure, yeah, it is a little off.
Well, the acoustics in this building are also hard.
Yeah, sorry. We were able to piece together an understanding of the rationale behind each bond purchase using various sources, but couldn't find a concise record explaining why each property was purchased and how each decision advanced the goals of the bond. More transparency would have been helpful, and the first annual report on the bond was only completed recently. Each project was justifiable in helping to further bond goals, although it's too soon to say if the overall effect will be that all bond goals will be met. Finally, we found the Housing Bureau, working with Home Forward, developed a targeted approach for getting tenants into bond units. Data on the 2 housing bond projects that have tenants show that bond projects are serving diverse populations. Voters approved a change to the state constitution in fall 2018, allowing the city to loan bond proceeds for affordable housing to private entities rather than owning all the bond projects themselves. That change will upend how tenants are placed in bond properties. Instead of overseeing leasing activities directly or through Home Forward, the Bureau is shifting gears and setting expectations for developers and property owners about how to find tenants from the priority communities included in the policy framework. We made 3 recommendations in this audit. The recommendations focused on the Housing Bureau better meeting voter expectations for future bond projects, improving documentation and communication about the rationale behind future bond projects, and evaluating how successful future bond property owners are at reaching target populations. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Good, thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Those are our 4 audit reports.
Thanks for coming in. We appreciate it. Thank you for the discussion. It was a good discussion.
Madam Auditor, you're the first auditor that Commissioner Fritz and I have served with who has made a regular habit of presenting your audits to the council as a whole and having this discussion. And that's a level of transparency that I'm not quite sure why we didn't do that before, although there were some interesting personality issues, I think, involved. But really appreciate that you've made this a cornerstone of your service, that you come and present directly to the council and by extension to the public and give us a chance to have this conversation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, Commissioner Fish is going to be excused. And speaking of Vision Zero, I have some traffic enforcement folks who are here and need to leave very quickly. I believe we can get through 720 and 721 very quickly, and then there's an emergency item that was pulled off consent that I'd like to get to. So why don't you come on up, please? And just by way of opening remarks, if you could read 720 and 721, Carla.
Item 720, authorize a State of Oregon traffic enforcement grant agreement and appropriate $25,000 in traffic funds for fiscal year 2019-20 to reimburse overtime expenses of sworn personnel. And 721, authorize a $543,600 State of Oregon traffic enforcement grant agreement and appropriate $271,800 in traffic enforcement funds for fiscal year 2019-20 to fund overtime for sworn personnel.
Colleagues, the grant allows PPB, and I'm speaking specifically to 720 at the moment. This is designed to support the Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Plan, which is designed to reduce accidents, particularly those involving commercial motor vehicles, and to reduce injuries and fatalities resulting from accidents involving CMVs, commercial motor vehicles. The Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Plan grant allows certified inspections from the Traffic Division to conduct traffic stops on unsafe driving behaviors of commercial vehicles within the city of Portland. These stops increase safety and reduce the occurrence of injury crashes. The amount of the grant is a maximum of $25,000 in federal grant funds for reimbursement in the 2019-2020 budget. The city has been participating in this program since 2012. These grants play a vital role in keeping people safe on our streets, and I'm very, very grateful for the hard work that the Traffic Division does. And we have Sergeant Engstrom and Captain Lorenko here, and 721 is the Work Zone Safety Grant, which allows the Traffic Division to provide high visibility and high contact enforcement efforts in specifically identified Oregon Department of Transportation work zones. And there's basically 4 purposes: to reduce the number of fatal injury and property damage crashes in these areas, to enhance driver attention and reduce speeds in work zones, to provide preventative and incident-specific public information and education efforts through social media and other opportunities and activities, and finally, to provide high-visibility contact enforcement efforts while patrolling work zones. And the amount of this grant is $543,600. Again, that's federal reimbursements for the upcoming budget. This is a program that is part of Vision Zero, and the city's participated in it as well since 2012.
Mayor.
Greetings, Commissioner Fish.
Mayor, council's been briefed on both of these grants. Can I just go right to question?
Absolutely. I'm sure they'd appreciate that.
Well,
They
one's a
wanna get back out on the
$25,000
road.
grant, and it's
Yeah. Go
not
for it.
controversial. The other one's another traffic enforcement grant. I just want to make a comment. The other day, when I was doing my Vision Zero tour, we went along Foster, which now is one lane with other infrastructure built in, and it's marked 25 miles an hour. We felt like a bit of a hazard driving at 25 because of the behavior of people behind us. But the most egregious behavior we saw when we stopped at an intersection and were just watching traffic was among commercial drivers. And, I don't want to unfairly call out Fred Meyer and, Uber and some other folks, but there were some trucks that were going way too fast. And my guess is that these truck drivers are given very unreasonable schedules about they have to meet, they have to make deliveries. And I'm guessing that this is probably something the Transportation Commissioner can take up with corporate executives, just letting, figure out who are where do you see the most trucks? Maybe sit down with Fred Meyer and say, your trucks are not, meeting our standard, and here's why it's important. The point I want to make, though, is that in a 3-hour trip, we never saw any traffic enforcement people. The only police officer we saw the entire day was at my favorite sub shop in Lentz, and everyone's entitled to have lunch, so that was fine. But there was no coverage anywhere we went, and we were literally on 122nd, we were on Foster, and we would stop for 10 or 15 minutes and have a conversation and then watch. So in my view, we've got to the point now where on traffic enforcement where we simply do not have the complement of officers we need to do the job. And I hope that the commissioner is not shy about making a budget ask because frankly, even just having the presence, even just having a car driving has the deterrent effect, like the reader boards and other things. But it was a little discouraging not to see any traffic enforcement people. And I hope that we make sure that the commissioner and the police bureau have the resources they need to do that. Otherwise, I'm in full support of these grants.
You know I'm not shy.
No, I know that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Very good, thank you. Any further questions? Is there public testimony on 720 or 721?
We had two separate sign-up sheets, but the same people have signed up. The first three will be Charles Bridge-Crane Johnson, Jeff Dubois, and Maggie.
Okay, and we'll go for 2 minutes because I want to take these votes before the commissioner has to leave. Before you leave, is it helpful, we could potentially put an emergency clause on these. Would that help? Would that speed up the process towards getting the grant dollars in the door?
Mr. Mayor, we're trying our very best to stay on schedule and not put you into that position.
Wait a second.
In the
Would you say
future.
It's a yes or a no?
It always helps, sir. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Go ahead.
Thank you.
You
Good morning.
can take a seat. Thank you both of you. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Commissioners. Charles Bridge-Crane Johnson, and there's people at the Police Bureau, probably these two folks right here, whose work is to find the supplementary funding so we can have at least some, as Mr. Fish noted, some traffic enforcement. So thanks to those who find this money from the state. Hopefully someday we'll be able to get to a position where we don't have to fund this as overtime. When it's an overtime expense, we're getting 50% less hours of actual traffic enforcement for our dollar. So, it's can't be missed that we're having some staffing issues at the Portland Police Department. But hopefully there'll be some brilliant sneaky management that can figure out a way to get more hours into traffic safety. And also later on, when we have an overall report from the police department, it would be probably helpful for the police commissioner and the rest of the commissioners to know how many overtime hours are going into traffic enforcement, how many have to go into violent crimes, and other, the other natures of the work. So thank you all for finding this money. Of course, I look forward to you voting unanimously to take the state's money. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Hi, I'm Maggie, Portland Homeless Town Hall. So I find it slightly hypocritical. The reason people don't want to go into police work and you have these overtime hours that you have to pay for at such high rates is we need a universal ban on assault rifles.
So Mayor, this has nothing to do with the grant.
We know.
I agree, Maggie. Please keep this to traffic.
I'm just saying, if you want to hire more police officers, let's ban assault rifles, because who
We're
wants to be a
accepting
police
grants
officer?
for overtime for traffic enforcement. Do you
Yes. Yes,
support
well,
us
if you want to
accepting the
hire more
grants?
people so you
That's
don't
not
have
what
to
this
do
is about.
this.
It's
This
not
needs
what
to
it's
stop.
about, Maggie. Thank you. Appreciate it. I move that we add an emergency clause to
Second.
item 720.
For the purpose of getting the grant as quickly as possible, being in the public interest.
Bingo. Any further discussion on that? Please call the roll on the amendment to 720.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment's passed. Same motion for item 721. Move to put an emergency for the reasons stated by Commissioner Fritz.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment passes. Please call the roll on 720.
Udaly?
Well, I just want to take a moment to thank the members of our Traffic Enforcement Division. It's a hard job, made even harder by underfunding and understaffing, and I appreciate Commissioner Fish's comments, and I have been beating that drum for a while now. We need more funding, we need more enforcement on the streets. We cannot engineer and educate our way out of what I consider a public safety crisis. This month, we reached the same number of deaths due to traffic collisions in July as we saw in the entire year of 2018. So, of course, I support these grants. I also support increasing enforcement overall. I vote aye.
Fritz?
Thanks very much to the Traffic Division for your work. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is passed as amended. Please call the roll on item 721.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted as amended. Thank you. Thanks for coming in. We'll go to the emergency item that was pulled off the consent agenda, item 710, please.
Carla, who pulled that?
Charles Johnson. Item 710, pay settlement of lawsuit by Adam Rollins in the sum of $80,000 involving Portland Bureau of Transportation.
Colleagues, this lawsuit arises from improper workplace behavior experienced by Mr. Rollins in late 2016. Through his attorney, Mr. Rollins filed a federal lawsuit in 2018 against the city alleging federal and state law violations. In June of 2019, the parties agreed to participate in a mediation session in an attempt to resolve the case. The session was productive, and the parties agreed on a proposed settlement of $80,000 inclusive of Rollins' attorney's fees. Rollins is no longer employed by the city of Portland. Approval of this ordinance will allow risk management to pay Mr. Rollins and his attorney the agreed-upon settlement totaling $80,000. I don't know if there's anybody from HR
I
here.
think we
if
have
there-
city attorneys.
City attorneys? I don't know if there's more you want to say.
What I had heard.
Okay. Public
Okay.
testimony.
We have staff back there available.
Okay, let's hear
Yeah.
the testimony, and then maybe
Okay.
there'll be questions. 2 minutes, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. Charles Bridge Crane Johnson for the record. And you know you're in trouble, especially Commissioner Fritz knows that when the city of Portland makes it into the Daily Mail, something's gone wrong. So today, in Britain's great Daily Mail newspaper.
Daily Mail is an absolute rag.
Exactly. And that's why we're in. That's why we're in.
It's good to have a local expert.
That's why we're in hot water when the city of Portland gets 23 shares on the Daily Mail's story about extreme hazing. So I hope that in making the allotment to grant this victim $80,000, there's been communications from the city, regardless of whether the city has accepted responsibility when it gives away $80,000, or fairly pays $80,000 to a victim of extreme hazing, that as a citizen, and I hope people who are in management, we're all very sorry that this happened to Mr. Rollins, and I look forward to your unanimous approval of the settlement for him. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Superhumanity. Again, to Mr. Rollins, I'd like to apologize on the conduct of the city of Portland and what you went through, the torture that they caused you, the trauma. And I think this number is really on the low side. And again, to any other victims within the city or who have been employed at the city in the past, please feel free to step forward. Please understand and look at this settlement, a number to work from. And if you feel necessary, come back with a class action suit against these sick, demented sadists that would have put you through this. It's appalling that this happened within the city. It is absolutely appalling behavior. And for anyone to think they should get away with the treatment of a city employee in this manner, you should be in prison for this. Prison. And whoever did this to this individual, I want to have them investigated. I want to make sure their kids are okay. I want to make sure their family members are okay. I want to make sure their animals are okay. This is one sick individual that did this to this victim. Your number should be up by 10 times that amount. This 80,000 is a low number. This is appalling to me. This is torture. This is trauma everlasting. And for the city to even think that they can get away with this and not do prison time is appalling to me. I'm demanding a federal investigation on this whole case and everything surrounding this case, and I want to get feedback, and I want an independent investigation. I demand this with this type of conduct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, can I make one comment?
Commissioner Fish.
We are often, when we take up these settlements, we get testimony from folks. Lightning is one person, Joe Walsh, I remember, and someone else, who often say, I think you should pay more in the settlement. I just want to take one moment to address that, because I used to be a plaintiff's employment lawyer representing people in civil rights cases and in similar kinds of cases. When you go to mediation, you get the services of an independent mediator who works with the parties to see if they can resolve the case. It is a voluntary process. The mediator reviews the strengths and weaknesses of cases. This is not to excuse the behavior here. I'm not speaking to the merits of this case. We obviously all feel terrible about this particular case, but the mediator gives his or her opinion. The parties talk it through. It is voluntary. If a plaintiff does not think that that's a good settlement, they have every right to proceed to court. Often lawsuits have been filed. A prevailing party in court often gets their attorney fees, so that's a pretty big stick, and is a pretty good incentive to continue the case and do discovery. So again, when we hear from people who say, I think this is too low, or you should multiply it by 10 or whatever, I appreciate the sentiment. The sentiment is you're offended by the conduct and what you're reading. But I just want to give people a sense of confidence that when these cases are resolved through mediation, it's a purely voluntary process. Parties have decided it's in their respective best interests. And most importantly, in every instance, the aggrieved party has an attorney advising him or her. So they are choosing to settle because they want to. They have every right to go to court, and we have no power to affect that decision. So just for the record, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Fish. Any further discussion? Legal counsel, was there anything I should have said or should not have said? Very good. Please call the roll.
Daly?
Aye. Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Wheeler?
I want to apologize to Mr. Rollins on behalf of the city of Portland and what he endured. Nobody in our community should have to endure that, and certainly nobody who works for the city of Portland should ever be subjected to that kind of behavior. So with this settlement, comes my apology. It's sincere. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, 704.
Proclaim July 31, 2019 to be Fame Day.
Commissioner Udaly.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Just a few quick comments before we read this proclamation. As the Arts Commissioner, a lifelong lover of the arts, and the mother of a son with a disability, it is a distinct pleasure to honor FAME today. FAME has served people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in Portland for 35 years. When FAME was founded, there simply were not opportunities for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to participate in the arts. FAME recognized this need for inclusion and acted to solve the problem. Numerous studies show the benefit of arts education, and as Portlanders, we all have proven time and time again how much we value arts education. At FAME, adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities have access to the experiences we all deserve: self-expression, connecting with one another, building community, and meaningful lives. I share FAME's belief that art is for everyone, and I know the work they do changes lives and makes our community stronger and more equitable. I want to give a special thank you to Jenny Stadler, Executive Director of FAME, Anne-Marie Plass, Board Member and FAME student, and Rebecca Morris, Development Director for FAME. Jenny and Anne-Marie are here to speak and show us a video presentation, so I'm going to actually turn it over to them before the proclamation. Welcome, and please state your names for the record before you begin.
All right. Good morning. I'm thrilled to be back speaking in front of you all again. Thank you for inviting us. My name is Anne-Marie Plass, and I'm a board member and a student at FAME Academy.
And my name is Jenny Stadler. I am the Executive Director at FAME.
I wanted to start our presentation by telling you a little bit more about FAME and getting some of you up to speed on some of the new projects FAME is involved in right now. I've been at FAME for over 10 years as a student, and I'm serving my second year on the board. FAME was founded 35 years ago, and at that time, we were primarily a performance organization for adults with developmental disabilities. FAME students performed one big show a year, usually a great American musical like Bye Bye Birdie or Grease. Over time, those first few years, FAME added a few classes and other performance opportunities. Fast forward 35 years, and now FAME is a robust arts education organization that has three main parts of our program. First, we're School of the Arts. We offer 25 classes a term, 3 terms a year. While a student at FAME, I've taken digital photography, musical theater, choir, and yoga. I've taken drawing, monologues, and dance, and that's just me. FAME also offers classes in podcasting, drumming, videography, and graphic design, and we're always coming up with new classes based on what students want to learn. We're also a performance program. We still do our one large production a year. This year, it's our walk opera called The Poet's Shadow that we're performing in collaboration with the Portland Opera. But also, in the last 10 years of FAME, I've gotten to perform at the Green Show in Ashland with Pink Martini, on the TEDx stage, and at the Blazers game. Third, we're a community. When you are an adult with developmental disabilities, the opportunities to socialize, form community, and make new friends becomes more and more limited. FAME offers the opportunity to do all these things at our school, and also through events like barbecues and dances. I've made friends that I'll have for life at FAME, and my life is richer for these friends. I think it has never been a more exciting time to be at FAME, both as a student and as a board member. We're partnering with more and more arts organizations to teach classes and work on shows. We've got an orchestra built out of iPads, and we're in the beginning stages of planning our own building, one in which we hope to have art space to share with the rest of Portland. Thank you for the support the city has shown to FAME over the years. Your grant dollars, this proclamation, the support from the Regional Arts and Cultural Council. I'm hopeful for the future of FAME and for a more accessible arts culture in Portland. Before we continue, we'd like to show you a video that gives a great sense of what we do at FAME.
What is fame? Fame is a place where you can create.
We discover talents that we thought we didn't possess.
The classes I am currently taking at FAME is podcasting, yoga, and choir.
I'm taking drumming because I like the movement in drumming, and we do it so well.
When I walk into choir, I see my friends, and I feel humbled and happy to be in FAME.
Before FAME, I was kind of bored. I didn't have a lot of stuff to do, but when I started going to FAME, I had a lot more opportunities.
It was hard before joining FAME because I never knew there was other people that had disabilities. Learn something new that you haven't experienced yet. If you are a songwriter, you can take the skills that you learn from songwriting classes and make your own music. Or if you're in the musical theaters, you have more knowledge on what musical theater is.
I was really shy when I was growing up. And because I think for many students too, you know, they have a disability, so in the back of their head, they're thinking, I have a disability, I'm not gonna be able to do a lot of stuff. I really do think that FAME does a good job of allowing students to take artistic risks. The teachers know that we have these talents and that they're trying to help us build those. And then, you know, if an opportunity arises for them to go out there, they can go with confidence and say, okay, you know, I can do this because I have somebody that's backing me up.
My favorite class is rock ensemble because we get to perform all year round and we get to do really great performances.
We just was awesome singing and standing up and showing people that we have talent and what we can do out on stage. Have people know that we can do a lot in FAME.
What it's like to be a part of a community that values all people is quite amazing because everyone feels like they belong at FAME and no one is let down.
I come to FAME because I'm with my peers. And you know, your peers are your friends too, and you can help your peers out and see what they are all about.
To be yourself, to not be afraid to show who your true colors are.
I feel that I have a real community.
Don't be afraid to take risks.
FAME is a place to be passionate, to enjoy life, to make friends.
You know, and it's important for people to understand just because we're different doesn't make us any less better than other people.
Anybody should be able to pursue what they want despite their disabilities, you know, because ultimately they're humans and they have rights just like any other person.
FAME.
Creating art.
Expanding possibility.
Hey, join us.
Thank you. I just wanted to finish up by speaking to you guys, to Mr. Mayor and commissioners, about why I'm so hopeful about what's happening in Portland right now, especially when it comes to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the arts. As we're all well aware, people with developmental disabilities can face multiple barriers to participation in the arts. both as audiences and as performers. And frankly, I've been at FAME for a couple of years now, and it's always surprising to me still how often people with disabilities are considered, well, their voices aren't heard, but honestly, how often people think they just don't have voices. So there are a lot of barriers, but I don't want to talk about the barriers. I want to talk about what I'm excited about, because in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of wonderful things that are happening in the arts community in Portland. Our upcoming rock opera is one example of this. This is an 18-month-long project. It was the brainchild of one of our staff members, Rob Smith, and someone at the Portland Opera, Alexis Hamilton. They got their heads together and thought, could we write a rock opera together? And what would that take? And now, 18 months later, it's happening in just 3 weeks. It's a student-written, student-designed, I'm talking about set design, costume design, student-performed rock opera. It's happening down at the Hampton Opera Center. And it's actually the work of 4 different arts organizations in town. It's FAME, it's the Portland Opera, who've been so generous and open and interested in learning about access. Wobbly Dance, a local choreography group, are our choreographers, and Metropolitan Youth Symphony is also involved, as well as a bunch of other artistic professionals. Here's the thing, is that about a year ago, I started asking these organizations, I said, do you want to work with us to bring this project to life? Do you want to give a voice to people who don't normally have a voice? And do you want to learn more about access? And I kept hearing yes. And I'm hearing resoundingly yes the more I ask. So you know who else has said yes? Portland Playhouse and Artist Repertory Theater have started casting our students in their professional main stage productions, and they continue to want to do so. Oregon Ballet Theater is going to be teaching ballet at FAME this fall. It's the first time we've offered ballet at FAME, and they want to form a long-term partnership. Portland Center Stage is asking our students to be cultural consultants on an upcoming production of theirs. And Linestorm Playwrights is actually going to be writing a playwriting class with us this winter, and we're hoping those pieces might get into fertile ground. So there's a lot going on. These are just a few of the many people I've started talking to, and we keep hearing yes. But I also want to tell you I'm excited about other initiatives that are happening around the city. We are talking to Portland Parks and Rec in September about putting on some kind of summer show next summer in the parks. Knowing us, it'll be some kind of sing-along rock concert that involves partnerships, because we really like partnerships. We are going to be giving a presentation on increasing access across arts organizations at the Regional Arts and Culture Council to all the general operating support grantees. And I'm thrilled that it's 3 months away and the space is so full that we're talking about having to get a new space already, because so many arts organizations are saying, yes, we want to learn. We've also received some wonderful support from some of your offices in regards to this building. We have a big dream building happening. It's the East Side Arts Center at Grace Commons. This building would provide housing for people with disabilities and for working artists. Low-income working artists. It would provide art space and a much-needed performance space, including an ADA accessible theater, which would include a light and sound booth, which are ADA accessible. This would be in Northeast Portland, and it would also give FAME a permanent home. So those are some of the things I'm excited about. I'm really grateful that you allowed us to come here today. I'm thrilled about the proclamation. Thank you. And we're just honored to be building more partnerships in this city and to recognize that the city is trying to make active change towards supporting marginalized populations. Thank you for supporting us. I hope we see you this afternoon from 4:30 to 6:30 in the building. We're going to be having a party. There'll be cake. There'll be music. Come on down. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Well, and thank you for focusing on the positive. My scripted remarks were too much on the kind of hardship, barrier, negative side, and I also really wanted to focus on the positive today. I love FAME. I'm so excited about Poet's Shadow and all these partnerships, and especially the building. I served on the first Multnomah County Cultural Coalition probably a decade or more ago, and I feel like conversations were just beginning back then about basic access to audience members with disability. It was not about inclusion of artists and performers with disabilities. So it's just thrilling to see our community evolve and become more inclusive, and I just can't say enough. Thank you for being here. I will definitely see you this afternoon at the reception. And without further ado, I'm now going to read the official proclamation, which the mayor has given me the privilege of doing. Whereas FAME was founded in 1984, it has empowered hundreds of adults with developmental disabilities to lead full creative lives. FAME is a school of the arts for adults with developmental disabilities that focuses on arts education, performance, and community. Taught by exceptional working artists, FAME's classes explore every arts discipline, including visual arts, writing, acting, music, and dance. Courses range from choir to fashion design to iPad ensemble, an orchestra that uses iPads as adaptive instruments. FAME's performances delight and move audiences around our city, and FAME's community building activities unite students as they create art together. FAME's work also reduces stigma around disability and encourages Portland's creative community to welcome and include people with disabilities. Whereas FAME provides arts opportunities, FAME gives people with developmental disabilities the chance to do many things, discover and nurture their artistic talents, gain real-world skills, build self-confidence, socialize, and connect with others who share their experience of disability and those who do not. Whereas FAME's programs require and reward quality artistic work, bucking the trend of persistently low expectations set for people with intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities. FAME's programs offer the same opportunity other artists have to stretch themselves and earn recognition from audiences. As FAME students develop their artistic talents, they learn to advocate for themselves and their vision, making themselves known as vital members of our thriving Portland community. Whereas The Poet's Shadow, FAME's original rock opera, created by adults with developmental disabilities, represents a new art form in the city, we recognize the contributions of people with disabilities to the arts. Created through a partnership with Portland Opera, FAME's groundbreaking work centers the voices and artistic efforts of people who have traditionally been marginalized in the arts and in all areas of our society, to the point where many people with developmental disabilities have not been welcomed, even in the audience, let alone on stage or in shaping the words, music, or feel of the story. Whereas artists with developmental disabilities have the opportunity to share their talents through The Poet's Shadow and every artistic work produced at FAME, the City of Portland shares FAME's belief that art is for everyone, community is for everyone, and excellence is for everyone. Now, therefore, I, Commissioner Chloe Daly, on behalf of Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim July 31st, 2019 to be FAME Day in Portland and encourage all residents to observe this day.
We'll suspend the rules.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Very high honor. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for being here, and thanks for that great video.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we're very honored. Thank you so much.
We appreciate everything you do. This was a wonderful presentation, very uplifting. Thank you so much for being here. Commissioner, did you want to get a photo?
Oh, sure.
We'd love a photo.
Yes, please.
I always forget about the photo.
Gives me a chance to steal.
Where'd you put us? Stand back here is what we usually do. And you stand in the middle. All right. And
Thank you so much.
right here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you.
And,
It's nice to meet you. Thank you. Thanks for coming in. There's room on my side if anybody dares.
Sure thing, Mr. Mayor.
How are you doing today?
Doing fine.
Excellent.
1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay, that's great. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. Thanks for coming in. Thank you. Appreciate it again. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to the regular agenda, item 722, please.
Appoint Adam at Plan Alp to, and reappoint Harriet Struthers and Daniel Morris to the Business License Appeals Board.
Colleagues, the Business License Appeals Board hears and decides appeals of determinations issued by the Revenue Division. These appeals primarily relate to the City of Portland business license tax and the Multnomah County business income tax programs, but they also relate to franchise and utility license fees collected by the city and transient lodging taxes collected by the city. Currently, there's 3 vacancies on the Business License Appeals Board. The board position that would be filled by Adam Aplenalp is to be appointed by the mayor, and if appointed, the 3-year term would expire on December 31st, 2021. The term of Harriet Struthers expired on December 31st, 2018. The board position held by Harriet is also to be appointed by the mayor, but subject to the approval of the Multnomah County by intergovernmental agreement. Multnomah County has provided their consent to this reappointment. If reappointed, the 3-year term would expire on December 31st, 2021. The term of Daniel Morris also expired on December 31st, 2018. The board position held by Daniel is to be appointed by the city auditor. The city auditor has provided consent to the reappointment of Daniel. If reappointed, the 2-year term would expire on December 31st, 2020. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Scott Carter. I'm the Audit and Accounting Manager with the Revenue Division. The mayor mentioned briefly the function of the board, but I wanted to go into a little more detail. The Business License Appeals Board is a 5-member volunteer board comprised of members of the public. When a Portland business files their city business tax return, the Revenue Division staff or technology will review or audit the filed return. When adjustments are made by the Revenue Division to correct the return, the taxpayer can protest these adjustments and explain why the return was correct as filed. If the Revenue Division does not accept the taxpayer's explanation, a final determination is issued by the Revenue Division, which would include additional support and explanation. If the taxpayer still disagrees, they can appeal to the Business License Appeals Board. The board will review the case, hear and review testimony, and then make a decision in the favor of either the city or the taxpayer. These decisions are final, and there's no additional administrative appeal available. Portland City Code requires that appointments to the Business License Appeals Board be made to provide an appropriate level of expertise in accounting methods and tax regulations. The 3 potential appointees meet the qualifications required by the code and should serve both the public and the City of Portland well in any matters coming before the board. I'd like to introduce Adam Aplenalp. He's the lone new appointment today. The other 2 are reappointments. Adam is the founder and chief executive officer of the Cobalt Group, Inc., a Portland CPA firm. His background includes serving as chief financial officer of several different startup and established small businesses. He also worked in the financial services industry where he did internal audit, risk management, information security, and fraud management work. He graduated from the University of Oregon with a bachelor's degree in accounting. Adam has stated his reason for interest in serving on the board is to apply his accounting and business knowledge and experience to productively contribute to local government. We believe Adam would make an excellent board member. I'm going to skip over the details of the other 2 candidates, which are reappointments, but if you need more information, it's in your packets. Both candidates have served the public and the city well in the past, and we strongly support their reappointment. Significant outreach has been conducted toward increasing the diversity of this board. To meet the requirements of this position, the outreach has been targeted to individuals that have a strong expertise in accounting as well as federal, state, and local tax law. The Revenue Division recently ran a recruitment through the Office of Community and Civic Life. The Revenue Division also worked with procurement services to identify potential candidates. The Revenue Division reached out to accounting and tax professional organizations, including the Oregon Society of CPAs, in order to specifically identify individuals that could add to the board's diversity. Thank you, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Very good.
Hi, I'm Adam Aplenalp. Don't really have much more to add. I think Mr. Carter covered most of it, but happy to be here and happy to contribute with my accounting and business knowledge to the board.
Well, thank you. I'll just say this. We're really lucky to have somebody with your experience step forward. I know there's a million other things you could be doing. You're very busy. This can be a fairly technical appointment, so we need people with a certain degree of knowledge, and we're grateful that you're stepping forward. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
I'll entertain a motion.
Move to accept the report or confirm the appointment.
I'll second it. We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you for volunteering. Aye.
Wheeler?
You're going to have fun also. I vote aye. Report's accepted, the appointment's approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next item, 723.
Accept bid of Moore Excavation, Inc. for the Northeast 47th Avenue Phase 1 LID, Northeast 27th and Holland LID project for $5,853,529.
Very good. This is a Peabody item, but I'll pass it to Lester Spittler unless Commissioner Udaly had anything she wanted to say on the front end. 723.
No, I think we can just cut to the chase, and Lester knows the drill.
Very good. Welcome.
Welcome, thank you. Good morning, Mayor Wheeler. Good morning, Commissioner Fritz, Commissioner Udaly. Andrew Abbey, the project manager, wanted to say a few things about the project before I get into the procurement report. So I'm
Very
gonna
good.
pass it off to him.
Welcome.
Good morning, Council. Andrew Abbey, Local Improvement District Administrator. I know you've had a long morning, so I'll be extremely brief. This LID was formed in 2016. It is an engineering marvel, and we're pleased to be joined today with Nicole Blanchard, who was the engineer on the project. She did exceptional work. This is probably one of the most difficult LIDs that I've ever worked on. We are not only building sidewalks, multi-use path on Northeast 47th, but we are also replacing a 100-year-old cast iron water main. You may recall that those occasionally break and leak, and we want to replace that while we're replacing the roadway. We're also extending sanitary sewer and storm sewer. I also wanted to mention that since Council formed this LID, we've had a number of other PBOT capital projects that have been added to our list of projects that we're going to be building in Cully. For example, replacing the Northeast 42nd Avenue Bridge, building a multi-use path on Northeast Cornfoot Road, and also building what is currently the largest LID in the city's history outside the central city at Northeast 46th and Bryant, where we're helping facilitate the construction of the new TriMet bus base. So we have a host of other projects that are physically tied into this project, and there's a real sense of urgency to get this contract awarded so we can start construction. With that, I'll turn it over to Lester. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. So City Council approved Ordinance 187665 on April 6th of 2016, and another ordinance 188514 on July 12th of 2017 that authorized us to issue a competitive invitation to bid for this project. We have since issued the bids, and they were due on June 21st of 2019. We received 4, and Moore Excavation is the lowest responsive bid of the 4. Their bid amount is $5,529.20, which is much, much, much below the estimate, which was $8,264,632. We have here in the report that the confidence level in the estimate was low. However, in talking to Andrew, that was a mistake, and that should have been corrected to have a high confidence level in that initial estimate. So we're happy about the price that we received from Moore at well below the estimate. For this project, we applied our 20% utilization goal for subcontractors and suppliers. Moore Excavation is not able to meet that goal. You have in the report a table of certified subcontractors that they will use on the project, but the total utilization is only at 11.78%. Moore Excavation is self-performing 67.5% of the work, and there is 20.72% of work that is going to non-certified subcontractors. Moore Excavation is located in Fairview, Oregon. They are not a state-certified contractor. They are in compliance with all of the city's contract requirements. And with that, we recommend that you accept the report and authorize execution of the contract. If there's any questions, we're happy to take those.
Colleagues, any questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
I move the item.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Udaly?
Thanks for being here. I love your excitement about our LID program, Andrew, and appreciate you and Lester. I vote aye.
Fritz?
Thank you for your breaking down of the subcontracting firms. That's very helpful. It seemed like Moore Excavation had been doing better for a while, and this is disappointing that they've not been able to meet that goal. So perhaps next time they bid, you could let them know that I'd like to see them in council. so I can ask them about their efforts and also whether they're still working on diversifying their own workforce if they're going to be performing so much of the work. Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the report's accepted. Thank you. Appreciate it, both of you. Next item, 724, please.
Authorize a 61-month lease from Jason and Mayunja M. Lee to the Office of Management and Finance
Do we need
for
to hold the
space
service?
at 220 Southwest Main Street.
We do.
located-
I'm sorry, this is an emergency item. I didn't see it. We're going to have to hold it over.
We're going to finish reading the title, though, so we can move
Yeah.
it. At 220 Southwest Main Street, located on the ground floor of the Justice Center for programs with ancillary services to the building at an average annual cost of approximately $54,500.
Okay, and I'm sorry, colleagues, that I missed this one earlier. Are we going to move this to next week, Ms. Doffin?
No, my understanding to 2 PM. It'll be the first item at 2 PM.
2 PM today?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, great. So we will move item 724 to 2 PM this afternoon. Move on to 725, please.
Approve findings to authorize an exemption to the competitive bidding requirements and authorize the use of an alternative contracting method of construction manager, general contractor, in connection with the downtown, Old Town, Southwest Main, Taylor Sewer Rehabilitation Project for an estimated amount of $7.1 million.
Very good. Mr. Spittler, welcome back.
Thank you. Good morning again. I'm going to hand it over to Susan, the project manager, and we're going to go through a presentation, and we'll walk through what we're proposing to council and the context of why we're seeking an exemption from our low bid requirement.
Great, thank you.
I'm Susan Yarton. I'm an engineer with Environmental Services. The next downtown, Old Town Sewer Rehab project that we have is going to be in Southwest Main, Salmon and Taylor, from Nato Parkway to Southwest 13th. Most of the pipe that we want to rehab is between 90 and 150 years old. Most of it can also be rehabbed sustainably with the cured-in-place liners. That construction method just requires us to have access to the manholes. There's no digging or excavation required, and it will give us additional 75 years of life to that pipe. The laterals all need to be bypassed. This allows all the businesses to stay open. It doesn't disrupt their use of the bathrooms or anything, but we need to determine which ones are active and not active. Some of these are full of roots, debris, so we need to figure out which ones are active. And some of this work might require us to have be in their basements, have agreements with them.
So the legislative action before you today is exempting this project from the competitive low bid requirement. So just for some context, our state statutes and our city code require us to issue invitations to bid for construction projects and make an award based on the lowest price, unless our local contract review board, which is our city council, exempts a project which requires us to walk through certain findings to provide justification and support for why we're exempting it from the competitive low bid requirement. So for this project, we're proposing a request for proposal to award a CMGC contract. Some of the findings that we address for this project, I'm gonna touch on them and highlight why a CMGC approach is better than a competitive low bid.
Could you explain what a CMGC is, please?
Yes, CMGC stands for Construction Manager / General Contractor. And that approach is used when you want to bring a contractor on board before the project is fully designed to be able to get their input into the design on things like constructability, sequencing, value engineering. It provides a much more cohesive and team-oriented environment with the architect, engineer, the project owner, the project manager, and the contractor via a CMGC approach. So we believe that there are public benefits to be achieved via a CMGC. By bringing on the construction contractor before the project is fully designed, they will have input on constructability, sequencing, scheduling, means and methods. So there should be less disruptions once the project is in construction to the businesses and residents and traffic and transit operations that'll be in the vicinity of this project. The construction schedule can also be reduced by getting feedback early on from the contractor. There can be better strategies for noise reduction and traffic control. Another added benefit is the value engineering. So the contractor is going to work with Susan and with the architect and engineer to inform the design to make sure that the project is executed as easily and efficiently and effectively as possible. We also feel like a CMGC is going to increase the public safety because the contractor is going to have input on the design. We can take certain things into account that the contractor knows about that the architect or engineer may not be aware of just because they are not in the business of constructing projects. Another benefit is that we feel like we will receive adequate competition, if not more competition, with an RFP than an invitation to bid. The reason for that is because there are obviously some risks associated with this project when you're replacing old sewer pipes in a downtown urban area. So we feel like there will be more opportunity for people to propose on this than this project and not necessarily take on the risks that they would via an invitation to bid, but be able to work with the project owner and the architect and engineer to inform the design and then work with them to come up with an estimate for the work instead of assuming risks via an invitation to bid. So that concludes the findings, the overview of the findings. I'm going to pass it back to Susan to talk about some of the alternative delivery drivers, why this is better suited for an alternative delivery method versus an invitation to bid.
All right. Just a quick overview. This map shows the entire downtown Old Town program. We have a couple projects currently in construction. Yamhill Morrison, which initially was being completed in May of 2017 when TriMet had their shutdown. We have a few more pipes we're wrapping up in the next month. And Crothers Mill in the Portland State area started construction in spring of this year. It should be wrapped up by October. The pinkish orangish area, those are future projects we plan to do in the next 10 to 12 years. Just basic overview there. So these drivers are very similar to what Lester just mentioned. Having contractor input during the design is huge. We need to upsize some pipe, and we plan to do it trenchlessly because it's almost impossible to dig downtown with all the utilities that are above us. The sequencing of work is not just our work. They are able to coordinate better with other developers, bureaus, franchise utilities. And one of the things we'd like to do is make the their performance safety record in downtown kind of a criteria, how they managed these things in the past. So when we're looking at the RFP, we have different items to see how they've performed in the past. Do you want to talk?
Yeah, another added benefit is we foresee this being having greater certified contractor and subcontractor utilization. We are able to take that into account in the evaluation of proposals and awarding the contract. And there is also a pre-construction period before the construction starts where the contractor will be able to outreach and engage all of our community partners to maximize the participation on this project from certified firms. If there's no more questions, we'd ask that you approve this exemption and allow us to issue a request for proposal for this project.
Very good. Any further questions? Public testimony?
Yes, possibly two people, Jeff Dubois and Maggie.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. She's passing. She's passing,
is
and
Jeff
I think
here?
Jeff's gone.
He's gone. Very good. Any further discussion before I move this? This is the first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Thank you both. And I believe that's it. Have I forgotten anything, Carla?
That's all that I have.
That's all I show as well. We are adjourned until 2 p.m.